And that's the starting bell. I don't know if that's a bell. I think that's like Siri, some recorded voice. Anyway, thank you for coming back, Ben. Thanks for coming for another talk, and delighted on this episode to be talking with both Ben Humeniuk and Travis B. Hill. Is the B required? Should I say the B?
Yes. I mean, not like in any whatever way. It's just makes me distinct from the other Travis Hills out in the world.
Absolutely, I get that. I usually use the D in my middle initial because there are other Jason DeHarts or DeHarts or however they say their names out there writing in different fields. And so anytime I publish something on comics or anything like that, I like the middle initial to be there just to be like I'm not the guy in chemistry.
Right. Yeah, no, I had a professor in one of my graduate programs that was like, "Hey, start using your middle initial when you write on things,
Hmm.
because you'll find out like just what you were saying. There's a lot of other people out there, and you want to be different from that when they're looking you up." And I was like, "All right, that sounds like good advice." And I started to notice all these academics, use either their first initial and then middle and last name, or their first two initials, or their first name, middle, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." So, yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I want to change
I
it
have
to
some regrets on this.
JRR, like
JRR, like
JRR.
Tolkien?
Yeah, I think I should do that. That would be original. Go ahead though. You were
No, I
saying.
was just saying I have regrets because I thought I was the only Ben Humanek out there, and then I went on Instagram, and there is a wonderful British fellow who has the same name and already
Yeah.
claimed the account. So if I'd been a little more strategic, maybe I could have had that social media handle. But guys, we know that Instagram is apparently cool with scraping images now, and so maybe that's a dodgy prospect
That's
anyway. So
exactly, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But this is very true, very true. But if it helps, you're welcome to speak in an English accent at any point in
Oh,
the interview. You're welcome
well,
to do
Pip
that.
Pip, I might do so, Governor, but I'll
Right,
stop that right
right.
now. I'll
Okay,
stop that right
yes,
now.
yes, yes, yes. So Ben, I was thinking of a question, and it took me a long time to come up with this question, to sort of lead us off, because the last time we were talking about Cthulhu and writing and comics and empathy and all sorts of things.
You bet.
And so here's the question. What's new? What's new in your creating? What's new in your collaboration? Because we also
Yeah.
have Travis B. Hill here as well. From
Yeah.
henceforth, I shall call you Travis for the interview.
Man, so Travis and I are here primarily to talk about Alaska Goodbye, which is a comic that we've collaborated on together. It's based on an original prose story that Travis came up with some years ago. We turned it into a mini comic together for the convention scene, just to kind of sell at our table. And then Band of Bards picked it up and gave us space to develop it into kind of a graphic novella length comic. It'll come out as a one shot on at the end of June of 2024. So it'll be in comic book stores. So we're excited, first and foremost, to talk about that. But Travis and I also have our fingers in some various short stories and other projects that we're working on. Travis has an ongoing vigilante series that's pretty fantastic. I've got a graphic novella that came out 2 years ago that's coming out again in revised format. So we're happy to talk about any and all of that. But first and foremost, we want to talk about this wonderful apocalypse that we've built together and why
Mhm.
people should read it and cry because we hope they will. We hope they'll feel very sad in a good way.
I'm just thinking about how, when you start to when you tell certain types of stories, this has nothing to do with what you just asked me, but when you start to tell certain types of stories, you start to notice those types of stories all over the place, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the the Alas Goodbye, there's another great book on the stands right now called The Last Mermaid, and
Mhm. Mhm.
by Derek Kim, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Derek Kirk Kim might be the name of this creator.
Derek
And
Kirk Kim, yes.
yes, and so it is very similar in what they're trying to do. I mean, obviously it's its own story that has its own emotional heartbeats and things that it's trying to do apart from ours, but it is very much a dystopian future, kind of scarce resources, but kind of mutated creatures on the earth, and a person and their pet on a journey in a mech suit, right? So it's like, oh,
Mhm.
I've got that as well. And then I think I just saw uh Furiosa right? This weekend,
Hmm. Hmm.
this incredible dystopian world, apocalyptic narrative in the future. And so, um, we're all thinking about this doom and gloom of what might be awaiting us in some weird way, but how can like hope survive, right? So that's kind of, and it's very interesting to see how other people take it in different directions and how we took it. And so I'm just, oh, if you like those types of narratives, if you like The Last Mermaid, if that's what you're reading, I mean, it's on my pull list. You probably would enjoy it. If you like the Mad Max saga, you would probably enjoy Last Goodbye. So, just things like that. Sorry, that's what I was thinking about.
I really enjoyed the pivot there from talking about the wall art to talking about the sort of solar approach. My pivot was going to be, so you surrounded yourself with creativity in this way, which I love.
Mhm.
How did the kind of collaboration, the surrounding yourself with one another and this process, how did that come to be?
We've gotten to talk about the story a little bit before in some other venues. So, I think the condensed version is this. The story essentially was a prose story of Travis's own conception initially. And Travis can give you some of the backstory on where it first appeared and how it got in the world, but it had not been adapted into comics. When we decided to table together at a convention a couple of years ago at Fan Expo Dallas in 2022, we started a conversation about would it be cool to have like an exclusive comic at our table. Zines, mini comics are definitely a thing on the independent circuit. It'd be fun to make one of those. So um, Travis, offered up Last Goodbye for comic adaptation, and we workshopped that into a script and then into a drawn comic. And when Band of Bards, who is publishing the full book now, put out a call for submissions for a horror anthology, we submitted our mini comic to that. And instead of putting it in the anthology, they graciously said we'd love to give it more space and expand it into a full story. Um, to slightly condense a little bit more, I think what Bards and Travis were bargaining for was maybe 20 pages of comic, expanded from 11 pages. I'm a fiend for making longer stories that could have square spines. This one will not. But I just kind of threw out there that I'd be up for making it 40 pages if they're down too. Um, and I think Travis smiled and said, I love this man. He's crazy. But it proceeded to flesh out the story wonderfully. We got to have a nice kind of Chris Claremont, Frank Miller storytelling in the car session on the way back from Heroes Con in 2022, where we talked about some of the beats of the expanded story. And then Travis scripted it from there and then waited very patiently while I slowly drew the new pages. And then that's it. The rest is kind of history. Now it's getting ready to get in folks' hands. And I think structurally, Travis was able to make some really cool choices to preserve the original tale while bringing
Mm.
new things out. And I don't know, just gotta brag on him for that. Like when a storyteller revisits their work to flesh it out, you could. There's always the temptation to pad it or to alter it or to undercut it. I don't think, and Travis did none of those. He enriched. And I don't know, Travis, I was curious, like what what do you think helped you keep like the original structure of the story while adding some new beats in? Like, how did you keep that discipline? Because I think that was an impressive thing about the story.
Well, I'll say this. The first thing was to make sure that you didn't have to redraw anything. Trying
I
to keep
appreciate that.
him as an artist, so it's not like I was going to rewrite anything you had already drawn that we had already told needed to stay.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so that was part of it. Like, hey, look, but the material's already there. And then also the part of the journey is told in first person prose, which I'm not, I mean, first person, like the short story was told in first person prose.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at first person caption inner dialogue in comics. Most
Mm.
of my comics, if you've read them, are don't rely a lot on captions in general, third person narration or even first person narration. I try to stay away from the caption boxes as I can. I'm not trying to wax poetic about a scene too often. I'm trying to let the characters kind of bring experience to the reader. And so a part of what we did, the mini comic was so much about that. It's about this one person's journey, but the expanded story that we're telling that comes out later this month was about getting to explore that world and see how this character gets to interact and then get to have conversations about this world we've created and where they're at in it and where these other people are at in it and conflict that exists. So I think part of it was were those things involved, right? So making sure that you didn't have to do any extra work than you had already done.
Which is always good.
And then figuring out, going to like what is some of my favorite stuff, and it's just dialogue and conflict and more dialogue,
Hmm.
more conflict. So
Yeah.
that was good. And just to backtrack a little bit, so this was we started this um to make you feel old, Ben, and how long we've been journeying this together. Um, it was Fan Expo 2021 where
I was
we did.
21. It was HeroesCon 2022.
Yeah, September 2021, we debuted it at the table. And so somewhere at the beginning of 2021 was when we started trying to figure this out together. So like it's been over 3 years now. Once it hits the stand in a couple of weeks,
Mhm.
we've been working on it for a while, but it's here now.
That's
And
right.
that's not Ben does not work slow. He said slowly work on the pages. That's because in between then and now, he's published like
Mm.
14 different short stories in anthologies. So it's not like he's not working slow. He's probably overworking and but he hits deadlines, and so that's great. And we had ours, and we knew what it was, and so
Mhm.
he didn't have to overwork in any way. I hope. I don't know. He
No, no.
felt different. So.
Like it fit well. So we did get a little allowance from Bards because Travis and I picked up a project together. Travis found it for us, but it was a short story for an online ministry organization that Travis wrote and that I drew back in December. And so we had an earlier deadline on this, and then Bards gave us room to move it because
Nice.
Travis found us a payday, and we're like, okay, well, we're gonna do this thing, and then we want to do the big thing too.
Oh, yeah. Travis, you were talking about dialogue and conflict, and so that makes me think about. I know that you live a dual life, academic side of your writing and work, as well as comics and creating, and so I too try to balance that life of like creative fiction, storytelling, poetry, exploration, as well as the academical things, the academical things. So I'm curious what that's like for you.
Yeah, so as a historian, and a theologian. Those are my two like academically trained areas. And that I write in, that's what I have peer review writing, right? And
Mhm,
so, but both of those um are highly kind of when you're presenting the information, it kind of is narrative a little bit, at least in the way I do. Like I'm involved in like New Testament theology, right? So Christian New
mhm,
Testament
mhm,
theology. So um most of my stuff has been like narrative analysis, right? In some of my more fun academic works, I've gotten to write for the pop culture and theology series, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Matt Matthew Brake is the editor, fantastic uh, editor of that series. And I've been in the two books on Spider-Man where I've like taken some of these theological themes that I really care about, like the idea of forgiveness and human interhuman like in human relationships, and then like how does God identify with oppression, right? So these two
Hmm.
themes, and then thinking through Spider-Man narratives, right? So I'm doing like narrative analysis, and same with history, right? You're doing some sort of historical narrative analysis, and when you're building, you have to have some sort of like um arc to it, right? To
Sure.
what's going on. If you're going to construct a monograph in any type of like successful way, I think there has to be some sort of storytelling there. But the heavy emphasis of the work is on what you can recover in the archives and in the historiography and in the theological conversations, right? So you're like in dialogue with sources of the past, and you're in dialogue with people who've spoken on those sources before. So you're creating this narrative, this conversation between these groups, right? So it gets a little bit in the weeds. You have to be in the minutia of scholarship. What you get to do or what I get to do in comics is I get to take these ideas of the way I think about the world and have studied and conclusions I've drawn and theses I've argued, and I get to embed those things in some sort of contextualized narrative
Mm-hmm.
where I get to kind of play out what I think and the way I think, and and the complexities that I'm seeing, and you get to kind of embed those into the stories that you're telling, and then you don't really have to. You can throw footnotes and conversation to the wind, and you just get to live in these ideas and build
Mm-hmm.
these worlds and have people. You don't want to boil down a person to an ideology. That's not what you want to do, but you want to give people complexity that you see in what you're doing. Maybe in your research work and the stuff you're digging through, and then you get to drop it into sci-fi dystopian futures with mutant cannibals or whatever. It's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, or kind of inner city street vigilantism, right? Or kind of those types of things. So metropolitan street vigilantism. I guess that's kind of what Batman is, Thorn is, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's fun. Whatever. I don't know. That's probably you could probably cut that.
Well,
Yeah.
there is such really interesting philosophy, and when you're talking about like playing out ideas of history and theology, I think about like Frank Herbert or Cordwainer Smith, and you really get to see their layers there. Uh, just going back to what you were saying about the apocalypse and post-apocalyptic storytelling, there's just something that I love about that kind of storytelling. And I don't know if it's like the raising everything to the ground and then getting to see what's possible
Mhm.
or what exactly it is, but really curious to see how you bring it together in the work that you've put together.
Mm. I think there's a big sense of it's almost like the same reason we watch horror movies, just one step removed. I think we look
Hmm.
at horror to kind of peer into the dark side of the human condition and look at the oh no's and the what ifs, and then come out maybe a little bit more sober or thrilled or wiser for the experience. I think with post-apocalyptic stories, we're primarily asking ourselves, what happens if we take civilization for granted? Right?
Hmm.
Because in
Hmm.
almost all of these tales, civilization doesn't work anymore. It's the individual or the group against the other individual or the group, and we don't have the apparatus of a culture that works really well on a large scale. And I think it makes us, if it does its job right, it makes us more thankful for the civilization we live in and maybe more mindful about how we can contribute to it, preserve it, or help it to thrive in a way that's not currently thriving. With this book specifically, it's interesting because civilization has fallen apart, but it really is about an individual's journey pre and post apocalypse,
Mhm.
and the individual's regrets that then motivate the individual to not be individualistic for a period of time. And I think that is unusual, right? Most of these are about critiquing the fall of a culture. Ours does have climate change as a component of the fall of civilization, but the story's not about undoing it or shaking the fist at those who like just destroyed the world with carbon. It's more so about here's my regret, here's my problem, here's what I'm trying to atone for, here's my moment to do that in a way I didn't expect. Is it okay to do this in a world where it doesn't seem like many people can thrive? And I like that. I do think that makes it thematically distinct from other books that may have similar trappings, to be honest.
Yeah, I remember reading Low by Rick Remender, who's my
Hmm.
uh uh writer. Um and I was like, man, all this stuff is super nihilistic and depressing and And I was like, I could never write something like this. But then you do, and you're like, I get it. It's not about sometimes writing, I'm coming to realize and appreciate people who I think have written great stories in veins that I was like, how this, like remember, like I'm thinking about. And
Mhm.
oh man, like why such great storytelling, but why are you so depressing, man? And it's like, oh, well, if you live long enough and you stare the future of reality maybe in the face a little bit, the point is not to shy away from it, it's to write about hope in the midst of it. Yeah, this thing's gonna end and humans are probably speeding that up, but something can survive and change, maybe the next stage of whatever life on this planet is until the sun blows up or whatever, and
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
maybe that's it. Yeah, anyways, I don't know.
We're standing on that rope staring into the abyss, but at least there's mutant cannibals.
At least there's mutant cannibals. And
That's true.
to take it on the theological trajectory, I do like, and I don't know if I've ever asked you this, Travis, but our mutant cannibals are also religious fundamentalists. They take the Judeo-Christian scriptures and use them as justification for predation and
Uh,
kind of oppressing other people, right? And so I guess I've always looked at them as a critique of fundamentalism. Travis, was that something that you had in mind when you first put that component into this story? Was it intended to be like a deliberate critique of fundamentalism, or was it more like, hey, this would be a cool way to turn the like Mad Max power hungry group on its head?
No, I mean it's not a critique of fundamentalism per se. It is this idea that um what I liked, one of my favorite parts, which people are going to read it and not think that it's anything, and it's one of my favorite parts, is when the main character um flips it on him and says, if you're gonna be this person from the apocalypse of John, I'm gonna be this person. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It shows that he knows it as well. And so it's like, it was just the abuse of a religious text, and you could call it fundamental, I don't know, but it's just the idea of the abuse of religious text, theological thought to do very awful things. And if that's
Mm-hmm.
what fundamentalism is, that's yeah, sure, But there's a lot of people that do that, right? The mistake is, here's the mistake, is thinking the people that do hold on to that, that do that use the text to do the bad things, they think that the other side doesn't know the text in that way. This is a theological thing that I'm involved in, and I don't want to get political on a show, but there's where I'm at. I went
Jason's
to
like, come on.
yeah,
by all means.
I went to Dallas Seminary, which is a very, I mean, it's pretty conservative, and I am very not that, right? And but I got my degree there, the degree, Master of Theology from that school. So I know the text as well as anybody there. And I think a lot of times when dealing with people who are in that conservative vein, and so this is probably a little bit of me writing into the book, right? But
I mean,
you
right what
know,
you know, right?
Mhm.
exactly. And not in any malicious way, because again, I enjoyed my time. I tell everybody I enjoyed my time at Dallas Seminary, and it was a great educational experience for me personally with the people that I was around and the people I learned from. So I'm not knocking that. I just know where it's at in the theological spectrum. And the majority of what, you know, scholars come out of there or pastors or whatever. But a lot of times the mistake is that, oh, this liberal, this more like left-leaning liberal progressive person who claims Christianity doesn't know the text like me, right? So
Mhm.
it's like,
Mhm.
well, that's your mistake. And so we both know it, and that's not the point. The point is not the knowing of the text. That's where people get caught up. The point is um, uh, fulfilling this idea of abundant life out into the world, right? If we're talking about Christian theology, like how can you be that to others? How can you bring that to others? How can that's the thing. What are you doing out there in the world? And that is the character kind of he gets that. He knows these guys are using this. text in the wrong way, and in the end, he kind of has the last word on it. And so that's probably a little, lived fantasy type thing. I don't know. But yeah, so that's probably it. I don't want to say I'm attacking fundamentalism, but that I think that conversation goes on in every religious circle at some point,
Sure.
right?
Mhm.
I don't know, like label it. Like right now we have the conversation of you know, on one far extreme Christian nationalism, right? And the other far extreme it's like uh liberal progressive Christianity or whatever. And so um that's the current conversation, but it changes all the time, and so that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you were talking about both we were talking about the idea of attacking a particular ideology or particular group, but I love the way you're talking about conversation because that links right back to what you were saying you like to explore in theology, which is ideas like forgiveness and social justice and critiquing oppression. And so it's always good to, I guess, to meditate on this idea that a conversation is not necessarily an attack.
Mhm.
That is good too. Yeah, that's a good way to say that.
Switched places. Wow. So in a wonderful moment of the universe coming together, my undergraduate degree was also in religion and theology, and so I've been on my own journey of exploring conservative spaces and liberal spaces, and getting to sort through some of those questions for myself as well. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, looking forward to those parts of the book, and I love how people underestimate comics because there's so much great philosophy and really spiritual thinking and just a variety of things that you can explore in comics. So
Absolutely.
appreciating that.
Yeah. I would say probably where our comic falls in terms of the application of these thoughts is very much on the side of justice. Like this this is a story where violent deeds are done by multiple parties to other parties. And at the end of the story, the hope is that the hammer falls down on the side of justice against the oppressor and not against the oppressed. So hopefully the story does that well in a way that's not just like revenge for kicks,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
where the people being punished for their misdeeds are somewhat deserving, probably in the same way that the vantage point of certain Hebrew scriptural texts would kind of posit the just reception of one's actions being revisited upon them. um, this is not a story where the cannibals get a chance to repent of the error of their ways. They pay a due price for it.
Yeah.
But that's part of the promise of an action story as well, right? We're delivering on that while hopefully pushing it forward past just that retribution to an unexpected point where the audience sees a real cathartic moment where someone finally finds um, the redemption they've been looking for the whole time.
So, well, glad to hear that in some sense there's justice, and also
Mhm.
that the oppressed do not then become the oppressors as well.
We have an explicit moment in the story where I think it's clear that there can be a stop short point, right? You don't have to go for bloodshed for bloodshed. You can hold yourself back.
That's right. That's right. And we will include a bibliography with the episode for folks that want to read Gramsci as well. First time we've gotten to throw that into an episode. So love it. Love it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Um, so I'm curious about for listeners out there, I always like to give the space for you to talk about those places where people can connect. You've mentioned several conventions. So any conventions coming up as well as web spaces, upcoming titles, things like that that you'd like to mention before we get to the final question.
Travis, you've got probably the most immediate confirmed appearances.
Yeah, I will be at New World Con in Oklahoma City on July, I think it's 13th and 14th, whatever that weekend is. Yeah, 13th and 14th. And then I'll be at Denton Comic Art Expo in September. It's a Saturday con in September. And then I believe I'm going to be at Memphis Comic Expo in October, um, for sure. And then still up in the air is New York Comic Con also in October. So that is my schedule for the rest of the year if everything goes well. Um, You can find me at travisbhillcomics.com. If you want to see some samples, I have some short stories up there, shorts of all of my longer series and projects. And if you want to follow me on social media, it's Travis B. Hill 5. I'm mainly just on Twitter and Instagram. And on Instagram, I literally just post about comics. On Twitter, you get everything else. And then Thorn, we keep referencing this Vigilante series. Thorn issue 2 and 3 were reprinted in shops this week. So lots of shops around the country have Thorn issue 2 and 3. If you're listening to this and you go out and buy one of those issues, you're more than welcome to contact me through my website, and you can let me know that you bought those, and I will send you a free digital copy of issue 1. So that is an opportunity for anybody who wants to stay reading that. I think that's it. Ben and I both have Ben and I went separately. We both have a short story. In the upcoming anthology from Band of Bards called Amongst the Stars. My story is with it's a space pirate comedy with Matt Guadio and Nick Capone, I think is how you say his last name, on colors, and Micah Myers on the letters, and it'll be really fun. And Ben can tell you about his stuff or his story in that book if you would like.
For
Over
sure.
to you.
Yeah. So Amongst the Stars is also my next thing. So in June, we want you to go to the comic shop. We want you to get Last Goodbye and the issues of Thorn that are available. And then on Kickstarter, we want you to back Amongst the Stars because you're going to get over 90 pages of awesome science fiction romance stories. Mine concerns two young aspiring astronauts who train for the space program together. One is held back by his fears. The other goes into space and is stranded by a fusion explosion. I was actually talking to a gentleman this past week. I just happened to be at a family camp event with him who works for the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, and he was answering some questions for me about like Delta V and the launch windows for Mars and what happens when astronauts have like a sense of disorientation. So I've been doing research on this. It's gonna be vetted,
Nice.
guys.
Nice.
And then I'll have my graphic novella, Brody Can't Be Broken, also from Band of Bards, which comes back out at the end of July in trade paperback format for only $10. And then, as I've gotten to mention on your show before, Jason, myself and Travis and I, our mutual friend Stoney Williams, has consistently written for Travis Gibbs' Cthulhu anthologies. And so I'll be drawing some short stories for a couple of upcoming bits with Stoney in a couple of those anthology series that are coming out soon.
Love it. Love it. Travis?
Yeah, how do you say it? Cthulhu. How do you say it, Jason?
I say Cthulhu, but I've heard many pronunciations, and I don't know if we want to say it too many times. Is it one of those things where he appears?
That's Beetlejuice. Don't say
Oh,
anymore.
that's right. That's right.
Ooh, ooh.
Ben, how do you say it again? Ben and I
Watch
were
it.
at Palooza, and he kept saying it, and I was like, "There's no way that's what it is." But go
Oh,
ahead.
I said Cthulhu this time, but I told Travis that the way I learned to say it was from reading Alan Moore's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Black Dossier, where there's a
Nice.
story where Lovecraft's world crosses over with this like kind of quirky Victorian, character, and the kid calls the creature Cool Lulu, and so I was
Ah,
like, all right, well, if Alan Moore wants to have it said as Kalulu, who am I to say no to that? Because it's the Wizard of Northampton. He'll curse me with his Glycan puppet if I do otherwise.
I
Um,
So,
like that Kululu.
but Ben kept saying Kalulu, and I was like, "Are you talking about Cthulhu?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "What? No way!" But then he explained it like that, and I was like, "Maybe it is. I don't know."
I'm not going to argue with Alan Moore unless it comes to reading Doomsday Clock, which I've done, and I'm sorry, Alan, I did that. I just wanted to see it. I was just curious, man. I didn't buy it. I didn't pay my money to DC Comics for the ripoff of Watchmen, but I just couldn't stop myself.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was good. Doomsday.
I'm reading the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm saying Doomsday Clock was good. Alan Moore can relax.
He's
I'm I'm reading the new book that he has. He has a prose novel coming out, and I
Mhm.
got a review copy of it this past week. So,
Holy smokes! It's the beginning of that like 5 book series about Long London.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Oh, Jason, do you have any initial thoughts you just want to share with us for beginning
Well,
of
I've
that?
only read like a page, but so far it's a really good page. It's a
Is
really good
it
page.
is it as dense as like Jerusalem? Because that's when I've been faint of heart to begin. Because apparently he's doing so many different things with the writing in there.
It promises to be an adventure. I'll just say that.
Very cool. We
A
expect nothing
literary
less from
adventure. Yeah.
yeah, nothing less from Alan Moore.
Yeah. So one more question was on the list, and that is please say something nice about each other. It's more of a request than a question.
I think I have met no one in comics that is intentional about engaging people as Travis. One of the things I admire about Travis is that his life mission is to turn enemies into friends. We've talked about this in the past, and I think I see that happening in his. Not necessarily that he has enemies, but that he is engaging people to make connections, whether it's through his work or whether it's through like working a space at a convention or being together in some online spaces like DMs and chat rooms. I just continually am amazed at how Travis uses his ability for engagement to make connections with people and respect that so much about him. And I think that has opened so many doors for Travis's work to be in places and to find audiences. And I'm taking notes every time.
Lovely, lovely, lovely.
Thank you for that, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely.
With Ben, something that always impresses me is he takes the time to know. I mean, he's very well read when it comes to literature, not in pop culture, and not in a way that, you know, screams, I'm part of nerd culture, let me show off everything I know. But it feels like so Ben is talking about me being this kind of connector and but Ben wants to be able to have a, meaningfully connect with people that he interacts with in these pop culture spaces because he's in it. And I think part of it, I do think part of it, um, Ben, if you don't, if the audience doesn't know, Ben is a high school English teacher. And I think part of it is to connect with his students and make sure that they carry on a passion for reading. So I feel like he engages with his students very meaningfully in what they enjoy reading. And so he knows so much about the most I don't know, it's probably not obscure, but it is like anytime someone is in a cosplay at a con that I have no idea. I have no idea these cosplays. Unless it's like Deadpool, I don't know them. I don't read enough manga. I don't watch anime. I have my hobbies and have my studies. I'm tired. But Ben, anybody that walks by, he knows the character.
Mm,
I'll
mm.
I will always be. It could be from some obscure video game that I've never heard of, and you should see people's face just brighten up and get to talk about their character. And Ben, and Ben knows enough to have that conversation, and so it shows that I think that he cares enough to know about people's interests in this way, where he's going to be in these spaces. And then I think it probably stems from a lot of being around his students and caring about what they're reading and encouraging them to read more. And the good thing about having someone who's so ingrained in comic spaces as Ben, as an English teacher, um, they can encourage you to read, stuff that your parents might say, "Oh, why are you reading that? That's dumb, or that's for kids, or whatever." And Ben can encourage, no, read more of that. If you like it, read
Mhm.
that. And so I'm always impressed. I'm just like, man, Ben and I have tabled at like 4 shows together now, and every time he knows some new person or new character, I'm like, how do you keep up and how do you do it? Uh, what was the one this past con that was like started talking about gun demons and something?
Oh yeah, it was a Chainsaw Man cosplay. Some of my old students were in Chainsaw Man cosplay. Yeah, yeah.
I
Nice,
know,
nice.
I know Chainsaw Man's super popular, and if I saw somebody in a Chainsaw Man costume, I would know that. Ben knows like every character from that book, and so yeah, and I was like, all right, cool, that's awesome. But yeah, I'm always impressed with his ability to connect at that level. It's very meaningful, and it just people love to talk about what what they enjoy hobby wise and pop culture wise, and so yeah.
No, thanks, man. I appreciate that. That's cool.
Wonderful, wonderful words. Wonderful words. Well, thank you both for the time. Thank you for the creating. It's been a fun chat. It's been an intriguing chat, and glad to talk again anytime. Please consider this an open invitation and a welcome space if you'd like to come back and talk comics, theology, history, or anything else.
Yes, we
Good.
love
Thank
it.
you so much. Yeah,
All right.
Jason, thank you so much for having us on.
A pleasure. A pleasure. Thank you again.